Now, these examples are just there to give you a helping hand. There's a lot to do, and in class I would normally leave an example I created up on the board for different sections, so you could borrow ideas, borrow sentences, chop and change it around yourself, manipulate them and use them to help you in the writing process. So here is a bit of an example on this page and the next one that I've got for the beginning of the diary. Now, I've chosen the bit where Billy leaves as my particular example in this case, and in this one Laura is standing there. It's her diary and she's looking out, she had been looking out to sea, and she's writing about that tragic day when Billy sneaks off aboard the General Lee. So I've written, "This has been the worst day of my life. A hole has been left in my heart that I think will never be filled. Billy has left us for a new family, a dreadful one, Joseph Hannibal and the General Lee." So it's a dramatic start. I've thought about the words carefully. I've thought about how I can portray the sadness. I've used words such as dreadful, worst day, hole in my heart, to really try and grab the emotion. So when I look back on it in years to come, I'm suddenly remembered the sheer terrible emotion that happened at that day. And this first initial couple of lines really grabbed that. The next couple of lines in my introduction: "As I watched the ship shrink on the horizon, the wind was screaming and screeching around me, echoing my screaming soul for my twin. How could he do it? The wind tore tears from my cheeks as I squinted into the distance." So I've tried to make, again, the next part of the introduction, the next couple of lines, really dramatic. I've thought about how the wind matched my emotion. It was a sad and terrible moment. The weather was going to be sad and terrible around me. I wasn't going to have a happy sunny day. It was going to be a terrible thing. I was going to talk about how I felt inside, about a twin losing another twin, that kind of parting of that bond. How could he do it? Question mark. The wind tore tears from my cheeks, and I'm squinting into the distance as the ship shrinks on the horizon. So it's getting further and further away, and there's nothing I can do about it. So we're only talking about 4 or 5 sentences here, just as that introduction. I've not talked about the main events. I've not talked about how an argument occurred, how Billy went off and spoke to Joseph Hannibal. I've not talked about the conversation up on the hill. I've not talked about him then sneaking onto the boat and then me going up to the hill to watch it. I've just hooked you in by saying this is the worst day of my life. Billy's gone and I am just screaming with sadness inside. So if you're interested in writing a diary about that section, go back, pause it, use these ideas, think about these ideas I've said to you as I'm talking, and see what you can manipulate, what you can change to make it more of your own and really develop that. Now, the next section is another part of the story. So, if you have decided to write about Laura rowing the gig, I've chosen a section here that, you know, it's just a small glimpse of what I would actually write during that exciting part. I could write pages on that section, but just the landing of the boat on the shore is all I decided to write about, and I filled my page with just that tiny bit. So you can see that you're trying to fill it up with as much amazing detail as possible. "Steady, steady," came the chief's exhausted voice. So it's his voice, it belongs to him. It should be an apostrophe S, although I have just noticed it's the name of someone, so naughty me, that should be a capital. And with that command, even the waves seem to obey him. So I'm really trying to put in there how he's talking and what's happening. I felt the boat rise with the waves, surge forward. So again, choosing the vocabulary carefully. And then we were surfing in towards the beach. So rather than just saying we landed on the beach, I decided to change that to surfing in towards the beach, where we were dumped with a thud onto the shingle. So again, instead of saying we landed, we came to a stop, I've thought about how I can portray that. We've got dumped with a thud. We've got onto the shingle and the rocks rather than onto the sand or onto the beach. I'm trying to add that little bit extra detail to that. With a splash, I staggered out of the gig and squinted through the rain. So again, you've got that impression that the rain's driving into their face, they're finding it hard to look through. And then through the screaming wind, I caught a cry that came from a man and not from the skies. So I'm just trying to give the impression there's a huge amount of wind, it's very noisy, and within moments I saw ragged men stagger towards me. So that gives that dramatic impression at that point to really get the emotion through. I've described every point from stepping out of the boat onto the sand, onto the beach, onto the shingle, and right through just to seeing the first person. That probably just took 3 or 4 seconds at the most. But by giving it that exciting lilt, I've described it so much it can occupy quite a large part of the page. Finally, I've got an example of the conclusion. I'm exhausted. My hand aches from pulling the oar. My fingers are numb from the cold, but I'm warmed through knowing that Billy is back with us. I want to write more, but I can feel my eyes droop. I'm tired, yet so happy. So this is a really short conclusion, which is I mentioned in one of the other videos. I'm just so exhausted now I can't write any more. I'm too tired, but I am happy. This has been a real victory for the family, but I'm too tired to add any more of that. I will add more tomorrow. So you are essentially just focusing on the middle part and giving it a short introduction to say how you're feeling at that moment, why you may not be writing anymore, but why it's been such a good day or why it's been such a bad day. If you were writing about when Laura saw Billy leave, you might say, I'm exhausted. I can't write anymore as the tears from my eyes have made the page so damp. I can write nothing else. With that, I will see what I can write in the future. Very, very simply, you bring that in the same manner to an end, but it's just about performing that quite quickly because you've focused on the middle, and because at that point you're either too happy to write anymore, you've written about the exciting part, or you're too sad, or you're too distracted. So you've written about the bit that's important to you, and then you're finishing it off for the end. Right. At any point, if you need to use those examples, please do pause, take your time. I've tried to say as many as I would do in class as well, so by all means borrow them. I don't believe that you shouldn't be able to take examples that I say, that I put on the board. If I put them on the board, if I've talked about it, if I've said it, then great, use it. Lots of authors will do that. And there are lots of examples. If you start comparing descriptions of locations in some famous books, you will start to see that they are very similar. Authors borrow ideas, they see something, they use that imagination, and then they rewrite it in their own words, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you see something there you want to borrow, by all means, please do.